everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast, and we are excited today. We are talking underrated rom-coms, and this is now our third episode that we've been talking underrated rom-coms, and the second one was over on my other channel, Rachel's Reviews. Now we're back on Hallmarkies podcast. So much fun. Check out both channels. They're great. I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and I have with me my friend Jennifer Chandler's here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me again. We are now officially a trilogy.
Yeah, can you believe it? I know. We have now I have a full exclusive spreadsheet just for Underrated Rom-Coms podcast.
Oh man, I've got a list of ones I still need to check out to see if they'll make the cut for the next one we do.
Yeah. This is getting serious here. Yeah. You're like, I had no idea I made this kind of commitment.
But it's fun. So yeah. It's not really a taxing thing.
Yeah, and I wanted to do this because I kept thinking of new ones as we were chatting back and forth throughout the holiday season. Oh, this one we should do this. Mm-hmm. There's another one we should add to the list. We should add to this. And with Valentine's in February, it just seemed like the perfect time to talk about some underrated rom-coms. And as we've said in this series before, basically underrated doesn't mean we think it's perfect or it's like a masterpiece. We just think it deserves a little love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about it. But did you have a good holiday season? Your Christmas season? Did you have a pretty good?
Yeah, it was nice. Busy, of course. And, it's been nicer. Obviously, Omicron is wreaking havoc, but it was right kind of in that sweet spot before things got wonky again. So got to see some family and just have a nice, relaxing holiday, and was grateful for all the time we got to spend with family.
That's good. Yeah. I know.
How about you?
Well, same with me because usually actually even before COVID, BC, I guess, I would still usually not see my family that much because usually my parents would go to spend time with the grandkids, during Christmas. Mm-hmm. And so we'd usually celebrate early. And in 2020, it was just me and my parents, which was different. So 2021, randomly, 3 of my siblings are now living nearby.
Nice.
For the moment. Yeah. And so now there's basically 4 out of 6 of us that are around. And then I went to Disneyland.
Awesome.
On Christmas Day.
How magical. Was it magical?
Of course. It's Disneyland.
True that.
It was a little bit of a bummer because it did rain and it was pretty cold the whole trip, but it's still Disneyland. I mean, come on.
Can't really go wrong.
Yeah, it's so fun. So, all right. Well, let's dive in. We have our 5 recommendations we're going to talk about, and we'd love to hear in the comment section or on Twitter. Let us know what you think are underrated and that you enjoy. We'd love to hear what you think what you think of our picks. That would be really fun. So why don't you go first? What's your first underrated?
My first pick is Meet Me in St. Louis. It is I love it. It's one of my favorite older movies, starring Judy Garland. And there's a bunch of other people that I know I should know who they are, but she's the main one. But I love it in general. It's such an interesting, it focuses on a family that lives in, shockingly, St. Louis, where they're going to have the World's Fair. And it just feels like a slice of life from that time period. You just watch them through different seasons, and there's nothing like super crazy and riveting and exciting, but it's just a really beautiful piece about a family and their problems that they're facing, and of course, who's going to marry who, and the romance or possible romance with the boy next door. And then I used to watch this at my grandmother's house like all the time, and she had a 2 VHS tape set. And the first one was the movie, and the second one was like the making of. And the director, I believe he was the director. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Vincent Minnelli. I wasn't sure if he's the producer or the director, but Vincent Minnelli supposedly fell in love with Judy Garland on set. And so there were a bunch of people that were talking about how the way that he filmed her was like him falling in love with her. And there was a bunch about their engagement. And it's just a beautiful movie. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that it's an ensemble movie. It's not just Judy Garland, which back then I think they did a better job with ensembles, but it's just a really nice, like it is a romance, but it's also about family love too. So I
I
love
love
it.
this movie so much.
I'm
I'm
so
totally
glad.
with you. I mean, just alone for "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," which is a song that I love and
Yes,
adore,
which was
and
invented for this movie.
yeah, hmm and I mean, I'm a huge Judy Garland fan. I love her voice. I just think she was a really sad figure that I wish had
Mm-hmm.
had a happier life,
Same.
but her talent I just really admire.
Mm-hmm.
And Margaret O'Brien as little
Yes.
Tootie is so cute.
She's a pill. She's funny. She's so morbid too. She buries her dolls
Yeah.
because they're dying of various illnesses. It's
Yeah.
so dark and funny and so very much like a kid. Like it's not a scripted, tidied up kid. It's like an actual
Right.
child with a dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, when they go to that for the Halloween portion and they go to that
Yes.
graveyard, that's really
Yes.
good. It's really
Yeah.
great. And yeah, when she destroys the snowman, it's an incredible piece of acting.
Yeah, well, and that's the worst. That's actually the worst part. In the
Oh.
extras, somebody told them that they were going to kill her dog or something, and that's why she freaked out and did such a good job of destroying the snowman because they told her someone was going to kill her dog. Oh my goodness!
Something must have happened. I mean,
Yeah, she did great.
incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's wonderful, and
And he's
the
got
guy.
so many great songs like Clank,
Yes,
Clank, Clank, went to Charlie.
yes, I
love
used to have
that
to sing
song.
that on repeat to my son when he was an infant. He loved
Oh.
trains and sounds, and so that was one of the ones that he would calm down. If I sang it now, he would be mortified,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't get to do it anymore, but
Oh.
it's okay. And
Yeah,
John Truitt was so handsome.
oh, how can I ignore the boy next door? It's so good. And plus it's a Christmas movie.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
So
is.
that's perfect for Hallmarkies. They're gonna love it.
It's so good.
Yeah. And I really love Mary Astor as the mom.
Mm.
She was also in one of the versions of Little Women. It's not the best version. It's not great, but she's great. And she's like to me the iconic Marmee, like the person I think of when I think of
I
Little
can see
Women and
that.
Marmee.
I can see
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
So,
they just had such a great, like all of them had such a great dynamic, and they felt like a
mhm,
real family. Like they didn't feel like characters that were one dimensional. They felt like,
right.
there's a grandpa who's one of my favorites. He's so funny,
Mhm.
and he's doing jigs all around the house. And but
And
everyone just fit in.
yeah, and I love the costumes
Yes.
with the big hats and it's that turn of the century kind of look. Is really fun and it's just one of the greats. So I think
It's just a feel good movie.
Mm,
It's just so sweet.
it's a very good pick.
Thank you very
Well,
much. I'm so glad you approve.
well, mine, I think in the words of my friend Ryan, I'd say a hard left, um, because this is not on the same level of quality of that classic film. The first one I'm going to talk about is called Drive Me Crazy, 1999. This movie, I think it got kind of lost in the She's All That phenomenon.
Mhm.
I like it better than She's All That. I know, shocking. Shocking.
I have
But
to
it came out the
admit, I
same year.
haven't seen it.
It's so fun. Uh, it's got Melissa Joan Hart and Adrian Grenier, and they play neighbors, and he's kind of like the cool, chill guy, and she's kind of I don't know, she's stressed out all the time and is like always
I mean,
worried about like they're very different. They're very different. And anyway, and so they end up getting broken up by their relationships, And so they pretend to be in love with each other in
Mm.
hopes of kind of bringing the exes back
Oh,
to
the
them.
jealousy play. Mm.
And it's all leading up to the big prom and everything. And of course they, become attracted to each other as they're pretending to be in a relationship. And I love fake relationship movies. It's one of my favorite genres.
It's
One
a
of my
good trope.
one of my favorite tropes. And I do think they actually have really good chemistry, and it's funny. And you also have kind of this side relationship between her dad and his mom start dating. So
Awkward.
they were kind of both
Awkward.
dating, which is awkward and funny. But I think it actually has pretty good character development. It feels relatively believable for these kinds of high school movies. And I think it's better than a lot of these other kind of similar teen romance, kind of stories. I do think it's underrated, and it's a fun one. I know I would be positive you'd like it.
Yeah, shockingly enough, yet again, my list is growing longer because you've given me another recommendation that I need to watch.
Yeah, I
I mean,
think
even looking at the images, it's like super flashback to high
yeah.
school. Everything, the hairstyles and the clothes,
hmm
it's like just picked it out of my yearbook.
Yeah, I think that anybody that's listening to Hallmark's podcast will enjoy this movie. It's in fact, I think that they should have them come back for a new Hallmark movie. Have Melissa Joan
Oh,
Hart
that'd be
and
fun.
Adrian Grenier, because they've both done some. But Melissa Joan Hart's been on the Lifetime train for a while,
Mm.
but we could have her back into Hallmark. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast.
The Sweet Life by bestselling author Suzanne Woods Fisher is the perfect read to get you ready for the summer season.
Jilted by her fiance, Dawn Dixon escapes to beautiful Cape Cod on a groomless honeymoon with her mother.
But she didn't expect her mother to risk everything, on a whim, to move there permanently or buy a rundown ice cream shop in need of repair.
In order to make their new life work, they'll also need her ex's help, so things get messy.
Find out more at SuzanneWoodsFisher.com or use the affiliated link below.
That's SuzanneWoodsFisher.com. What about you? What's your next pick?
My next pick is The Family Man, starring Nicolas Cage and Téa Leoni. And if you have talked to me ever, you know probably that I like time travel movies. This is kind of like a more modern spin on It's a Wonderful Life. Not exactly the same, but that kind of like he's a successful businessman, and it's like what would happen if you'd made a different choice at a different point in your life, and where would it take you, and what would you have, and what would you value, and I think it's a beautiful look at the different things that we think are important. I love Téa Leoni, like big girl crush on Téa Leoni. She's just stunning and hilarious. And I love them together. Nicolas Cage is just, I don't know if I can use the word charming for Nicolas Cage, because he
But he
always
really
looks
is.
he looks a little crazy like all the time.
Right.
like I just don't know that I personally can assign him that word, but it's just their chemistry is great. It's such an endearing story. I think it resonates with people that always kind of wonder what if. And again, it's kind of like that It's a Wonderful Life glimpse into what it would be like if ... I just love it. I watch it all the time. It's one of the ones, as kind of our criteria for this. I feel like not a lot of people have seen it. And I think my parents haven't even seen it. So I recommended it to them, and I'm desperately hoping that they like it. Because there have been a few lately that I'm like, oh, you should watch this. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, that was bad. But I don't think this is one of them.
The only thing that's hard about this movie, I do really enjoy it, and it's like another Christmas movie. You have two on your
It is.
Christmas
I
movies
know.
on your
I
list.
know. Yeah.
Um,
I fit. This is why probably we're friends.
yeah, very much. The only thing that's hard about it is that you go through all this character development, and then it's all a facade. It's none of it's
Mm,
real, right? And so
mm.
then I've kind of tried to have them meet up at the end, but the kids aren't real. The growth, everything that's fake, and
Spoilers.
um, and
Yes.
so that's the only thing that's like kind of hard about it. And so
I agree. That's
yeah, but I
that's
still
my
like
favorite
it.
thing. I know we're not really talking about this one, but it's my favorite thing about 13 going on 30.
Mm,
That she was able to rectify her choices and make the right ones.
yeah.
Whereas a
Well, and
lot
they
of time hop movies or kind of what if movies, they have a chance to make a different choice, but they don't have a chance to do it over, which is
mhm.
the case with this one.
Yeah. There was one this last season for Countdown to Christmas on Hallmark Channel. It was my favorite of the whole season, called A Kiss Before Christmas. It was
Mm-hmm.
so good. It has James Denton from Desperate Housewives, and Terry Hatcher also from Desperate Housewives.
I love her.
And
She reminds me of my roommate from college.
oh, you'll love this then. Anyway, in the movie, he's a good guy. He kind of picked the family path and is still just trying to grind it out at this business, this office. It seems like everybody gets all the perks, that is kind of dishonest. And he's like down the straight road with the kids and the wife, and he starts to have a moment where he's like, why did I, make this decision? Why did I do that? Kind of a George Bailey moment.
Mm,
And he wakes up and the family is gone. So it's the opposite of Family Man, right? So
yeah.
he has to try to kind of, well, first he's like excited because he's got like a Ferrari and stuff like that. But then, of course, that
It
doesn't
is
last.
exactly the opposite. Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't last long. But I think it works better as a story because you have somebody that's trying to get back as opposed to this sort of fake family.
It's like the grown up Home Alone. You
Mm-hmm.
wish your family's
Yeah.
gone, and then they are.
Yeah. And what they did that was so brilliant is they had his two kids be adopted. So then he, in the alternate reality, sees them with other parents and with other, and I thought that was
Oh,
very, very smart.
that is clever.
Because obviously if he didn't, if it was normal, if it was a traditional children, you wouldn't, they would just be not there. So I thought that
Yeah,
was very smart.
that is clever.
He has to
That's a
see
good
them.
call.
Yeah. Anyway, so you should check that one out. But yeah, The
Yeah, it
Family
is now
Man
on my
is
list.
a good one. Yeah. All right. So my next one is one that I have a lot of nostalgia for. It's an animated film because I love animation, and it's Anastasia. And I think
Mm,
that Anastasia, I mean, I pretty much think that almost anything that's not made by Disney could be, unless it's like Spider-Verse or something like that, almost everything could be considered underrated, underappreciated. Maybe Shrek wouldn't be, but
That's true. They're rabid fans for Shrek.
yeah. But Anastasia, I just love the romance between Dimitri and Anya. And you kind of have the princess and the sort of commoner, the swindler, and he learns his ways. It's kind of got a bit of even a Music Man kind of feel at times. I love the songs. I think
Mm,
they're really great.
mm, mm.
And it has problematic elements. I get it, that it's about a real person, a real time, and and you have like a talking bat, and you have some
Bar
things.
talk.
Yeah, I can understand why people don't like that and get offended by it, and I appreciate that. But I don't know. I just still, maybe it's nostalgia talking. I just really like the connection between the two characters. I really like the music and the animation. Some great sequences in there, like when the train crashes, is a
Mm,
really stunning animated scene. This was definitely made to kind of compete with Disney at its height when you're talking
mhm.
Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and things like that. It's not on that level, but I think it's in the conversation. And so I don't know, I just love it.
I love it
It's
too.
great.
They did a bunch of really neat things with the animation. They tried the
Mhm.
CGI stuff, and like especially with I remember her jewels being like
Oh
startlingly
yeah.
brilliant. But that story is so great. Dimitri is such a dish.
Yes.
Um,
And that whole scene when they're dancing.
on this ship. Oh,
Mhm.
yes.
So good. Yeah.
Oh, he's so great. So great. Yes, I love them. And actually, so I don't think I've even showed my kids that because my big beef with it is just it's scary. The Rasputin element is really dark and creepy.
Yeah.
And so even as a grown up, if I watch it, I fast forward through all the Rasputin parts, which the only downside to that is you miss Christopher Lloyd's brilliant performance and Bartok, which is
Mhm.
honestly a great loss. But so I wish they could just tone that down. Obviously, we can't go back and do that, but
I was
it's still such a great film.
Yeah, I was just telling Sean that when I was reviewing the Disney canon, I watched The Great Mouse Detective,
Mm.
and I was like, "What is this weird mouse burlesque scene in the middle of this movie?" I'm like, "I do not remember this at all." And so then I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, was this this movie, and it has this weird mouse scene?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, I always skipped over that part."
That's so funny. I remember
So
as a kid singing that song, and then now looking back, I think, man, that's weird to have that whole scene in there and get the kids to like the song, and then they're literally singing like a burlesque song just all over. Like it was a weird choice for sure.
yeah, yeah. But I do feel like the I think it's called "The Dark of the Night." I think is what the song is called.
So good.
I really like that song
The
by
soundtrack
Rasputin.
is phenomenal. I mean, it's just it's barely I can't even think of one off the top of my head that really competes with it.
Yeah, and it
It's so
definitely
solid.
feels like that scene especially feels like a copy of Be Prepared, like, in
Mhm.
so many ways as far as the
Mhm.
animation and the song and everything, but still I still like it.
Yeah.
It doesn't
It's
bother
really
me
good.
that
And
it's
Angela
derivative.
Lansbury was so great in it. Meg
Mhm.
Ryan is like phenomenal. She's like I don't know.
Yeah.
If I had a
I
movie about myself, I think she would have to narrate it just because I feel like she's how I think I sound.
I
Not in real
agree.
life. I know I don't actually sound like Meg Ryan, but in my head,
Yeah.
my head
And
voice is Meg Ryan.
they did a good job of because they have different people singing for both
Yes.
of them, and they
Oh, I'm
did a
so glad you
very
said
good
that.
job,
Hold on a minute. I'm checking something
like,
real quick.
making that mesh. I mean, and Disney does that all the time. Like, you have in Aladdin, the speaking voice and the singing voices are different. Also in Pocahontas, the singing and the, speaking voice are different. So, there's lots of examples of that.
Yeah, especially with animated films, they do that a ton. Um,
Yeah.
I always thought
So
it was funny that Singing in the Rain did that. So there's like the plot was that the lady sang for the famous actress,
Oh,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
really someone else sang for the lady that was singing for the. I always thought that was funny. Okay, hold on. Checking something. Yes, Liz Calloway is the singing
Oh,
voice.
yeah.
And
Broadway.
oh, she's amazing.
So good.
She did
Yeah.
so many things. She is basically the voice of my childhood. I just didn't know it. She's in all the things that I loved, and especially the songs that I loved most. She sang
Mhm.
most of them.
And
So,
but Kelsey Grammer does his own singing, and he's great. I love him as Vlad.
yes, he was
He's really
fantastic.
good.
It's just
And
good. It really is. It's such
mhm,
a good movie.
yeah,
So
and
good.
a really good romance. For some
Oh,
reason, people always forget animated films whenever they do sort of categories. I feel like that's not strictly animated, and this is I think a really good animated romance.
I
So,
super agree.
what is your next pick?
Well, I'm going to springboard off of the Liz Calloway train and go with the Swan Princess. So
Mhm.
she is also the singing voice of Princess Odette in The Swan Princess. I love this movie. There's, it's not Disney, so the quality isn't as high as far as animation goes, but it is such a solid and fun story. There's one dark element, but I don't think I worry about traumatizing my children. I know you and I were talking earlier about the 80s and all the movies that came out in the 80s and like how much that mess with our heads. Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven, E.T.,
All Dogs Go to
American
Heaven.
Tail.
All Dogs Go to Heaven is so weird. I watched it for
I
family
watched it
movie
all the
nights.
time. Like
It's so weird.
I have this weird thing where like there's all these films that I used to love and I watch them on repeat and then they scarred me for life. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so if they traumatized me, why did I watch them so much? But I totally did.
It's basically about a gambler trying to not go to hell.
Yeah, it's brutal. I'm still haunted. I can't even remember the name of the dog, but the one that was in the dog heaven, and she's like, "You can never come back." It's traumatizing. It's completely. I'm feeling nauseous just thinking about that scene right now.
Yeah, I was. We were talking off air, and that we can all blame ET. Like
Yes.
that's the one that was in '81, and that movie is super. I love it, but it's super dark. I mean, when Elliot and ET are in that
That creepy plastic tunnel.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Why don't you listen to us? You're like, ah.
That whole movie has like the
He's
stress level just
dying.
cranked up to 11 the whole time. Like the family life is stressful, the friends are stressful, the alien encounter is stressful, getting the alien back home is stressful. Like the whole thing is just like it's been a really long time, in all fairness, since I've watched it because that movie just freaks me out. That is another one I used to watch a lot, and I just got to a certain point and I was like, nope, I'm done. Not doing that anymore.
The 80s were just like a different time for children's entertainment.
Yeah. But the Swan Princess is
Yes.
I feel like a good balance. I mean, it does have the evil element, but it's not so bad that you feel like it's, kind of tainting the rest of the film. I love, again, the music in this. It's one of the little fairy tales where, of course, they have a longer history. They basically, as soon as she's born, her dad and his mom decide that they should basically see if they could get them to get married so that their kingdoms can join. So it's like this long betrothal, and they go visit each other at summertime, and it's such a fun movie where it goes back and forth as you watch them grow up. And so in that way, it's not like your typical fairy tale where they meet and 2 days later it's like, I love you, let's get married. But that switch is flipped very fast.
Yeah.
So even though they've known each other a long time, there's kind of like an iffiness, and then all of a sudden it's like they're super committed. They're in, and it's like, oh, okay. But I can't. I drive my children nuts singing from this movie. I love this movie. I would watch it very frequently if I would be permitted to. I do watch it as often as I'm permitted to by my family and suggest it a lot. It's such a great movie. It's so fun. And it's such a great story.
And it's directed, this was definitely in those other studios trying to do the Disney thing. But it was directed by Richard Rich, who is one of the, what are called the 9 old men over that Walt Disney, they were old in the sense of talent, I guess. He called them the 9 old men. Richard Rich was one of them. And I just, that name, Richard Rich, great name. And this was probably maybe not overrated in Utah, but it's kind of got a cult following maybe in Utah because the whole thing was made in Utah. It's got tons of Utah talent. The music by Lex Diaz-Vado, who's like a Utah guy, and so it's kind of got this like I'm in this weird little hub where people love Swan Princess. But yeah, no, I mean it's enjoyable. I don't like it as much as Anastasia, but
I like it. I wouldn't say I like it more just because I think that might be borderline insanity, but I really like it. They're very close.
I haven't seen them, then give them a shot.
Agreed.
Because yeah, I think it's worth it. All right, and it is kind of funny that so Anastasia. Uh, I write for a website called Rotoscopers, which is all about animation, and we always do some kind of joke for April Fools.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, like I don't know, 2015, like a long time ago, well before the purchase of Fox in 2019. Uh, they put on Rotoscopers for April Fools. They put a thing about that Anastasia was going to become the next Disney princess, the official Disney princess, and people
That's
went
trouble.
crazy. And I think even to this day, it's one of the most viewed articles on the whole website. Like,
That's so funny.
and so it's really ironic that now, because Disney bought Fox, now Anastasia
Technically,
could be considered a Disney princess.
that's funny. Have you seen the musical?
I did. So I did see it. I just saw it from a high school was producing it. And so I went up and saw it. And so it's not like Broadway level, but I
Mhm.
didn't love it as much as I was hoping I would. They definitely, it's like they kind of overcorrected. I
It
feel
went
like,
more historical.
yeah, and they made it really, really serious and really kind of drab. It just wasn't fun.
Oh,
And that was a bummer to
that
me.
is
I
one
mean,
thing I think in the animated film they did so well. Like, obviously, Russia at that time was not a great place to
yeah.
be, and they made it. I don't mean it to sound blasé, but they made it funny while
Mhm.
also like bringing attention to things are not good here.
Like I feel like there's a happy in between.
Yeah.
There's a happy in between making what they did and having a talking bad. I feel like there's somewhere in between that we probably should have been at. So I was a
Yeah,
little bit disappointed with it.
that's fair.
It's certainly not. I mean, any musical. If I'm out at the theater, I'm having a good time. But yeah, I can see why it didn't do all that well on Broadway and why it didn't last that long because I don't know, just like who you don't want to go to sort of a drab, sad night at the theater.
Some people do. I am not one of those people.
Yeah, me
I am
either.
not.
Me either. All right. So my next pick is my next pick is called Plus One, and this is one that I know you're not as high on as I am. But I think it's very
I'm so
underrated.
glad you picked it, though. I'm excited to talk about it.
This is an R-rated rom-com, so if you're not into that, it's not Hallmark approved. If you don't like that, then you're not going to enjoy this. The language, some of the sensuality, but it's basically about this. There's two friends who agree to be each other's plus ones. They have like tons of weddings, and of course, as they're sort of kind of a fake relationship or marriage of convenience, kind of, and which I love. I love those, like as I already said, which I'm crazy. Um, and as they keep going to all these weddings together, and their friends have very fancy weddings. I'm like, wow.
I want to know what
But
his job was that he could afford a gift for each of those weddings.
yeah, I
Like,
can't remember. I can't remember what
he
his
worked
job
with his
was.
dad, but I don't remember what it was that he did.
Mm.
I think.
And I thought that it was funny. I thought they had really good chemistry. And I just really liked, especially Jack Quaid. It was the first thing I'd ever seen him in,
Mm.
and he's of course Dennis Quaid's son.
Mhm.
And he was, I just thought, super swoon worthy in the movie, and I enjoyed that. And so I I don't know. I thought, oh, that was a pleasant little lark that I saw in 2019. But yeah, what did you think about it?
I thought it was fun overall. I think when I talked to you about it, and maybe this is an inaccurate description, but it reminded me a little bit of Palm Springs without the
Yeah,
twist. So it was. I mean, I've
I'd agree
seen
with that.
obviously a bunch of movies where there's like buddies put together, and I also really am fond of the, oh, we're just going to pretend. And super doesn't work out that way at all. They were fantastic together. Their chemistry was great. I did really like how at the beginning, she kind of seemed to be the needier mess of the two. And then
Yeah.
at the end, even though he seemed to be the more stable, he just wasn't facing some realities about his character flaws. And I found that a really intriguing character arc.
Yeah, that's true.
And they like, she was insane, but she knew it. And she owned it. I mean, I thought it was a really good exposition on feelings. Felt like it was really realistic. All the weddings they went to, it wasn't all perfect. Some speeches were really good, some speeches were really bad, and you're like cringing.
I mean, I tell you, I would hate going to all those weddings.
Oh my goodness.
I mean,
I can't even imagine. That is so many. I'm trying to think. My mind just went completely blank. There's another movie where they do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
when you're in your early 20s, that is a thing. You just go to
It feels like all the time. Yeah. My cousin, I remember like every weekend hey, when are we going to get together? Oh, I've got weddings like every weekend from now until forever. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure when I'll be available. But you already mentioned it was R-rated. I don't generally have a problem with that, but it was a little crasser than I think of when I think of quote unquote rom-coms. So I think going into it with the perspective of it was a rom-com, it was just raunchier than I expected. It isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but
it would probably be a good one for our listeners if you have watched a lot of the Hallmark and you need like a little contrast, a little break. This would be a good one.
Yeah, it was fun, and I ended up watching it, or chose to watch it because I watched the trailer. I was trying to find a couple that I hadn't seen before that I'd heard about to see if they would count as underrated. And I played the trailer, and Sean started cracking up at part of it, and I was like, okay, well, if he laughed, I'm going to check it out. And
yeah, I do feel like this would be a pretty good one. If you're with a bunch of kind of guys, this would be one that is like palatable, I think, I mean, guys like the Serby stuff too, but I feel like this would be a pretty good gateway.
Yeah, into rom-coms.
Good pick that they'll find so tolerable.
To the dark side.
Yeah. We'd like to take a second from this episode of the podcast to celebrate our sponsor of this episode, and that is the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast?
Do you want an inside scoop into what happens on the podcast?
Do you want early access to episodes and loads of cool perks?
Now is the time to become a patron of Hallmarkies podcast.
By becoming a patron, you get to access our patron Facebook group.
You can request episodes or even be a guest on the podcast.
And most importantly, any patron can join our monthly movie watch-alongs with stars like Paul Campbell, Natalie Hall, and more.
It's as low as $2 a month to join in and become a special part of the Hallmarkies family.
Please consider, and we will love you forever.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
But what's your next pick?
My next pick is Yesterday. And it's a movie about a musician who's trying to make it, and I think he sounds lovely, but he just can't break the ceiling. He can't get a good gig. He can't catch a break. And so he's riding home on his bicycle, and like there's this huge power outage. This isn't a spoiler, it's in the commercials. Huge power outage. He gets hit by a bus. And when he wakes up in the hospital, nobody but him remembers the Beatles.
Yeah.
And so he's a musician who can sing, who can play the guitar. He realizes nobody remembers the Beatles. So he desperately tries to recreate all the things that the Beatles did, and then kind of skyrockets to stardom. And it's like, what does he do? How does it change his personal relationships? How does it change his priorities? And it's just funny. There's a couple little things in as the movie goes that harken back to the blackout and maybe other things that changed, and it just cracks me up. I think Himesh Patel and Lily James have great chemistry. They're like friends, but you don't know if they want to be more or not. It's very confusing as to if they like each other. It seems like it's a strong possibility, but then you're not sure. It's just fun. If you like the Beatles music, I think you'll like it. There's a twist in it that I just absolutely loved. Ed Sheeran's in it, and I think that's hysterical. I think he did so well in the film, and I love every moment he's in it. It's just so funny to me. So
Mm-hmm.
I love this one.
My favorite part of this movie is the scene where they find John Lennon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's such an interesting thought experiment. Because if he was just a fisherman and then he didn't die, that he lived a full life, but he didn't produce all this incredible music and this incredible stuff. Like, what? It's kind of the same thing I think about was like Mozart, like he had a tortured life, but it produced all this great stuff.
Yeah, it's
would
definitely
we
thought-provoking.
want him to have if we could do it all over again, would you say have the tortured life because you're going to make all this beautiful stuff that we treasure to this day? Who wouldn't want all that great stuff? But
and I think that's what's most interesting about this in particular, because they don't even have the choice. A lot of these other movies we talked about with the time travel element or the what if element, the person affected gets to choose. And in this case, he has no idea that's even
still,
an option.
It's kind of interesting to think, what is the better John Lennon outcome? Is the better John Lennon outcome?
I legitimately cried at that scene. I thought it was it was
really
so
good.
Tastefully done. And as soon as I finished, I was like, Dad, you have to watch this movie.
Yeah, that was really moving.
Mm-hmm.
But the part I didn't like, I have to say, I didn't love the romance in this movie. I felt like he was pretty rude to Lily James, and I didn't feel like he deserved her.
That's fair. I can see that.
Yeah. And so that was my frustration, I guess, with the movie. But it's definitely like an interesting idea and an interesting film, and definitely worth a watch.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right.
I agree. I think I like the romance part, but it's not strong. It's more a fascinating plot and what's happening, as opposed to this is the best romance ever.
Yes. So my next choice is a movie that came out kind of mid-pandemic. So nobody saw it, but I did, and I liked it. It's called The Broken Hearts Gallery. And this movie, it stars, I'm very sorry, I'm going to butcher your name. It's Geraldine Viswanathan. And it has Dacre Montgomery, who is on Stranger Things. He looks like Zac Efron. Anyway. So she plays this woman who works for this art gallery. And she is kind of a hoarder of sorts. She saves all of the different artifacts from all of her different relationships. And so she gets dumped by her current boyfriend, and she creates the Broken Heart Gallery. And it's kind of a gallery, with all different items from her relationships. And the word on the gallery kind of spreads and becomes this sort of social media thing. He's trying to restore this hotel, and anyway, they just end up spending a lot of time together. And I thought it was really cute. It is, it's a PG-13, but it is a strong PG-13. It does have quite a bit of it's pretty vulgar for PG-13, I think. I'm actually surprised that it is PG-13. But I don't know. I just thought it was really sweet, and they had good chemistry, and it's nice to see, a lead that's a little bit of diversity in there. And so I think it's worth checking out as one that kind of got missed because of the pandemic. It has Bernadette Peters is in there. It has
Ooh.
Philippa Sue from Hamilton. She's in
Wow.
there. It has Utkarsh Ambedkar, who, if you've watched the new show Ghosts, he's on that. He's great. I mean, he's somebody that you definitely would recognize if
He's from
you
Pitch
saw it.
Perfect.
Yes, he's in tons of stuff.
Yes.
Anyway, so it's, I think, worth checking out.
Well, I unfortunately missed it, but I have added it to my list. So hopefully I'll get around to it soon.
All right, what is your next pick?
My next pick also came out in the pandemic, and I feel like people missed it. Obviously, Twitter is such a hard place to gauge because there's like
I know.
pockets where everybody knows what you're talking about, and it's not a real sampling of the real world. But
Yeah,
this came
it's
out
true.
in 2020, and it was my favorite movie of the year, and it's Love and Monsters. And I remember hearing the title and Sean like, hey, you want to watch this? I was like, whatever. Like, I remember how I felt that night. I was just kind of like, blah. And I'm like, sure. I mean, pandemic, just bring it on. Bring on the monsters and the end of the world. And, you know, just kind of expecting it to be a post-apocalyptic and end of the world stuff. Just whatever. Just not happy at all. And while I wouldn't call it a happy film, I just think it was handled so beautifully. I think the perspective was so fresh, and he had a whole bunch of crappy things happen to him, and he experienced a lot of really bad things, but the way he reacted to it was so unusually healthy. And so basically the Earth, there was, I believe it was like a meteor was coming at the planet. It was huge. It was an Earth killer. And so they shot nuclear weapons up into the sky, and they destroyed the rock that was coming. And the chemicals, or after, I don't even know what it's called, whatever comes after the nuclear explosion,
the
kind of
fallout.
settled down onto the Earth. And while it didn't impact the humans at all, it did mutate bugs and reptiles. And so they turn into these horrible monsters. I mean, like, just awful, really gross, not going to even lie. And so everyone has to like run and escape and it completely adjust to a new Earth, because while it wasn't destroyed, it also kind of was. So people are spread out all over, living in factions, in the ground, wherever they can be safe and secret. And basically he had, I think, a high school love, who he was separated from when the bugs first started to mutate. And he discovers that she's alive and not too crazy far away. And he's like awkward and clumsy and really not brave. And he just decides, I'm going to go see her. And so he decides to walk from his encampment to hers, which is, I can't even remember how far it was, and it's just his journey and, the things he encounters and the things he learns about himself. And I love this movie. I cannot. This is one of the ones that, I don't know. I'm like, have you seen this? Oh, you should watch it.
Yeah. I
love
agree.
this.
It was one of my favorites, if not my favorite, of 2020. I can't remember. It was definitely my top 3. I really love it. I think it's got kind of everything. It's one of those movies that it's got the romance, it's got the humor, it's got the this would be another really good one if you're trying to find a movie to watch with your significant other that doesn't typically like romance. So this is definitely like a good one, a gateway kind of one. It's got the
component, but it's not overly saturated. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the creature design. I was so happy that it got nominated for Best Visual Effects, because on such a small budget, what they did to create really interesting, like they're like no other creatures that I've seen in other movies. They're new. They look fresh, and that's exciting. And it's unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do because they're these mutated.
They're terrifying.
Yeah, scary.
Gross.
And yeah, I just never really exactly knew where it was going. Maybe with the exception of the kind of the pirate, that part was pretty predictable, but still, I just really enjoyed it. and I thought it was great. And I mean, I just can't believe that they did all that they did for $30 million. I mean, you
That's
think
amazing.
about
I didn't even know that.
you think about movies like any Marvel movie, you're spending 150 to 200 million. I mean, that's crazy. 30 million versus 50 million. What? Unbelievable.
It's so good. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, that of all of them, that's the one that I will push the most. Please. It's not your typical rom-com by a long stretch, but it's such a good movie.
And I normally don't like dystopians. I'm not a Hunger Games fan. I didn't like whatever those ones with Shailene Woodley. I didn't like those.
Oh, Divergent.
I don't like I didn't like those. I don't like the other ones with Dylan O'Brien. The wall ones.
Maze Runner?
Maze Runner. Yeah, I didn't like those. I just don't like dystopians usually. So the fact that I still like this, and the fact that I liked it in a in a pandemic in 2020, that kind of says a lot, because that
really
should have
does
turned me off. Yeah.
Like I said, and this is my personal reaction to it, but I was super just like, bring on more trauma. Like what's a little more? And it was so refreshing. It was such a great film.
I would watch a sequel if they did one. You don't need one, but I would be curious to see what's going on with the characters.
Yeah. I'm trying to get some of my friends to watch this. We were supposed to watch it for my birthday, but then we all got sick. So I'm still trying to reschedule, but I'm like, okay, for my birthday, I get to pick the movie. So we're going to watch Love and Monsters. And they're like,
and I showed it to my nieces, and they all enjoyed it too. So
awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, my last pick is I think underrated. Well, it wasn't underrated when it came out. It got nominated for Best Picture. It won Best Screenplay. It was pretty popular, but I feel like it's been kind of forgotten since, because it's directed by Woody Allen, and it's called Midnight in Paris. And obviously Woody Allen has his huge baggage that goes along. And if people don't want to watch Woody Allen, I totally get it, and I respect that. Anyway, so this movie, it stars Rachel McAdams and Owen Wilson. And it is about, Owen Wilson plays this writer who really idolizes the writing from the 20s and 30s. And particularly people like Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, people like that. And Gertrude Stein. And so he goes to Paris with his girlfriend, and played by Rachel McAdams, and she's kind of selfish and not great. She's not a great person.
She's a mean girl.
And she doesn't care at all about any of his dreams or what he wants. But he's with her for some reason.
Because she's Rachel McAdams.
Right. And one day he is walking along the streets of Paris, and he finds this kind of time loop, I guess, where he ends up in 1920s Paris. And so every night he ends up in 1920s Paris, and he gets to meet all of these incredible people that he's idolized for, kind of put on a pedestal. And it's easy to do that with a past era, be like, oh, I really wish that I had been, born in a different era than I'm in. And it has the cast is absolutely huge. And there's so many people that come in and out that he meets. Like I said, Tom Hiddleston plays F. Scott Fitzgerald. And he's writing Great Gatsby while they're there, which is fun. I love Corey Stoll as Ernest Hemingway. He's just really great. And then you have Pablo Picasso. You have Kathy Bates as Gertrude Stein. There's just tons of people. Wow. Salvador Dali. Adrian Brody plays Salvador Dali. And there's a lot of other people that I'm like, I didn't even know who that is. So that's kind of fun also to be like, oh, who's that? And catch all the Easter eggs and fun. But the point of the movie is more just sort of like how we as humans so often don't appreciate the era that we're in and the moment. And we're always kind of hoping for something different, or looking back, or idolizing the past instead of instead of living in the moment and realizing the blessings that we have now. And so it kind of has something to say. And so as he's in with all these people that he's idolized, he realizes like, oh, they were just people like me, and they had struggles and were imperfect. And then he meets Marion Cotillard, plays this woman who, it's interesting because she idolizes like the 1880s kind of era, like sort of Victorian kind of era. And so she's always looking back and she's like, oh, the 1920s are so lame. And he's like, what? This is the best, So that's interesting too, to think back that probably then they were looking back and
yeah.
I mean, and especially interesting now when we have such a nostalgia ridden culture, where everything is nostalgia looking back, whether it's the 80s or the 90s,
or even prior to 2020, like
yeah,
just desperate for whatever we considered normal before this COVID era, BC.
And sometimes that's good and I enjoy it and it's effective, and other times it's like it feels almost patronizing to the point of like, you're not actually telling a story, you're just giving me things that I recognize. And anyway, so I just love the movie. I think it's so good. There is a romance. Obviously, you kind of he has this girlfriend, but then there's also there's his relationship with Marion Cotillard, but then there's also another.
Wow,
he's
very
busy.
Sweet.
I know. And it's so beautiful. It'll make you want to go to Paris. I think it's one of the best movies that Woody Allen ever made, if not the best. I mean, he's still making movies, but it's definitely, if not my favorite, one of my favorites, that's for sure. So if you haven't seen it, and
I have not,
then
which
I
is
think
weird because it sounds like a movie I would very much like.
Yeah, evidently it's available on Hulu, so you can watch it on there, and I think most people will enjoy it if you can get beyond the Woody Allen thing. And like I said, if that's a deal breaker for you, I totally understand and respect that. But there we go. That's my last one.
Excellent choices.
Yes. So I guess we should go over our picks really quick. I have Anastasia, Drive Me Crazy, +1, The Broken Hearts Gallery, and Midnight in Paris.
And I have Meet Me in St. Louis, The Family Man, The Swan Princess, Yesterday, and Love and Monsters.
Great. Very good. So let us know what you think about our picks. We'd love to hear in the comment section or on Twitter. And if you have your own picks that you think are underrated, then definitely check it out. And I'll put the links to the 2 previous episodes that we did so you can check those out. And Jennifer, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at PB and Jedi.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please take a look at that. And also make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all over social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. We really appreciate that. And if you are listening on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. And we also have our Patreon group and merch store, which are a lot of fun. The information's in the description. And thanks again for doing this, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Thanks so much for having me again. This is always fun.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.